Happy Friday, Dub Nation. It's a live extravaganza with Kylen Mills and yours truly, Cyrus Saatsaz. We got some sound from Steve Kerr and Bob Myers from their media appearances this week. Got some interesting data pertaining to plus minuses, differentials per 100 possessions. We're going to reveal to you what five-man unit in the NBA is most efficient. Newsflash, hint, hint, it's on the Warriors. We're going to reveal who else on the Warriors is successful and not so successful this year, and who's out there in the buyout market. We got a lot to cover, and it's all coming up next. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. You can follow Kylen Mills on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and probably a lot more at Kylen Mills. You can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Twitter at DogSurfRoadshow. Kylen, great to see you. Happy Friday. I guess I'm going to start the show, if it's okay with you, with a soundbite from Steve Kerr. 95.7 The Game, the flagship station of the Warriors. They're very lucky in the sense that they have a coach's show and an exec show, and it's one of the only places where Kerr and Myers do extended media interviews in a one-on-one setting. So why don't we start with that, if that's all right? How are you doing, by the way? You good? Happy Friday.
Good. I'm doing great. You know what we do need to touch on maybe at the end,
yeah.
Cyrus, is this nonsense with the NBA All-Star Weekend. Did you see that? They don't want to hurt anyone's feelings by having them be picked last, the reserves. So they're like switching up the order.
Let's talk about that later. That is ridiculous. That sounds ridiculous. I'm not a...
I just remembered we got to touch on that because I've got many thoughts. But first, this is more pertinent. Doing well. And I actually haven't heard this quote. This is the first time. So I'm excited to react to this live.
Beautiful. Well, here's Steve Kerr talking about to Damon Bruce and Ratto what his thoughts were about the James Wiseman trade.
What made his on-court presence so fatal to your winning formula that he couldn't even be put on the floor for 8 minutes? 4 minutes in the second quarter, 4 minutes in the third. What made him such a tough fit?
Well, basically it just came down to his inexperience. That's all. And where we are organizationally, trying to win a championship. And I know you've heard me say that before, but that's the answer. You're talking about a guy who just has very little basketball experience with the 3 games in college, and then the number of injuries he's had over 3 years. I think if I'm not mistaken, he's played maybe 60, 70 games, something like that. It's just not enough when you're talking about competing for a championship, and that's where the issue came. And I know Bob has talked about it. I've talked about it. We love James. We love his talent, love his character, and still feel that way. And bottom line, he just didn't have enough experience to be in the situation with this team, with this continuity, because I couldn't afford to give him the runway that he needed to make some mistakes and go out and play.
All right. And just before I get your reaction, Kylen, it's worth noting Wiseman had more starts in his career than Anthony Lamb and Ty Jerome combined. So the whole argument of experience always rings funny to me. And one more thing before I get your thoughts, Kylen. Damon Bruce will be on this show next Tuesday. I have to get him on. I texted him. I'm like, dude, you talk to Kerr all the time. I don't know if it's driving you insane hearing these answers. It's driving me insane. So he will be on the show next Tuesday. I'm stoked for that. Thank you for your patience, Kylen. What were your thoughts on Kerr's comments about James Wiseman?
I just think the whole James Wiseman debacle is frustrating. And you mentioned the experience factor. So I do feel like he has somewhat of a point because of the fact that Wiseman only played 3 games in college. I do think that experience is super important. My frustration is, number one, why choose him then as the second overall pick in the draft just a couple of years ago if you know he's going to be a project. And this is something I actually said in an interview in 95.7 The Game just 2 nights ago. Like, to me, that's where there's been a clear disconnect between the front office and the coaching staff, and just in what the Warriors envision the next couple seasons being. If the Warriors were so concerned about getting players who were only going to be win now, who were going to be very ready to play and contribute at a high level, not going to need any development because of Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson's window closing, then why would you choose a player in the draft who you know is going to be a major project? Like, to me, that's something that doesn't take a genius to figure out. You know, the fact that he basically went from playing in high school to the NBA since he didn't play in college. I mean, even players who are one and dones at least play one season in college and typically play for a really high level program where they are getting very competitive experience. So to me, James Wiseman, picking him, you should have seen him as a player who has a lot of raw talent, but would need more time, need more experience, and need games to develop. Why pick him if you weren't willing to do that? Why choose him if you weren't willing to let him play and play through some of those mistakes? However, I also agree with some of your frustrations about the two-way players playing over him. I think if you're picking this guy in the draft, you clearly believe that he has the potential to be a future star. If you're picking him as high as a second overall pick, you know, why not give him that time and the opportunity to play through mistakes and develop over two-way players who I think are much closer to their ceiling? There's no question. So, you know, that's where my frustrations lie. I feel like James Wiseman was put in a tough situation because he was expected to be an immediate win now player, and he was drafted on potential, not on readiness to contribute to the NBA. And you look at some of the other folks in the draft that were, you know, drafted around the same time as him. I mean, they were just much more ready to contribute immediately. And I just feel like the Warriors front office should have known that. And that's where I see some type of disconnect in what they were expecting of him and, you know, what they were looking for coming in. And so I think it's interesting as we talk now just about a possible disconnect between Bob Myers and Steve Kerr and how to develop these young players. Should the young players be playing? And I know we've kind of, there's no proof, but, you know, we've kind of read between the lines that there does seem to be some type of disconnect going on. And I think that goes back to even selecting James Wiseman in that draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gilbert, I have to play this or read this chat that Gilbert Arbalo write. Kerr was extra spicy in this interview. I got to actually go through this whole thing and maybe play more on the next show. Apparently, Damon compared Patrick Baldwin Jr. to Wiseman 2.0. I got to listen to that, Gilbert. I didn't listen to the whole thing, but now I'm curious. I will certainly check that out. You know, speaking of bigs, I mean, because clearly the Warriors don't have one now. The news came out that Kevin Love is negotiating a buyout with the Cleveland Cavaliers. This has been talked about for years, but now that his contract's about to be up, he's going to be a free agent after the season. The Cleveland Cavaliers are reportedly going to oblige. So Kevin Love will be on the buyout market. Serge Ibaka is still on the buyout market. I think Patrick Beverley, with the news that Gary Payton II will not be available for probably months, realistically. I think Patrick Beverley will be an excellent short-term fix in terms of perimeter defense. Your thoughts on those three names and anyone else in the buyout market?
I like all of those names. I mean, I'm not opposed to anyone. I just don't know the Warriors are going to make a move, but I think that they need to, and I'm really, really hopeful. I mean, I just saw some rumors swirling around on Twitter today that the Warriors are potentially interested in Kevin Love or interested in making a move. So fingers crossed that might be true. Again, rumors, no idea if there's any truth to that. But first of all, okay, so I tweeted actually about the Kevin Love thing, like the day that Shams tweet or whoever it was tweeted that initial news. And I got a lot of pushback. It was like kind of 50-50 from Warriors fans. Some people are like, absolutely not. The Warriors need defense. Kevin Love doesn't add anything on the defensive end. And then the other half are people saying, absolutely, we want Kevin Love. You know, because of the offense he brings, he can shoot, he can be a stretch big. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Ideally, I mean, in a perfect world, you could add both, right? I mean, you could add Pat Bev and a Kevin Love, or Gary Payton II gets healthy and adds that perimeter defense in time for the postseason. But I will say, for people who are critical of Kevin Love defensively, I mean, Nemanja Bjelica and Otto Porter Jr., I thought last season were super effective, and neither of them were individually great defenders, and they both were not quick. Like, there's no questions asked. But they're smart and they're veterans, and they did enough, and they know where to be on the court, and they ultimately they were solid defensively. I don't think either of them were liabilities when you look at who was being singled out in postseason play on Warriors defense. So to me, if you like what Nemanja Bjelica and Otto Porter Jr. added to the Warriors lineup last season, Kevin Love could be comparable because he does have that outside shooting. And I haven't looked at what he's shooting this season. I understand he's on the decline. He hasn't been great, but even last season, he was 39%, I think, from three. And so you're still adding a stretch big. You're adding a little bit of size. I mean, I tweeted out the other day, like the Warriors are running out lineups and the tallest guy is like 6'6", 6'7". So even a couple inches that Kevin Love brings makes a difference, even though he's not a center. So I would be happy with that. I have mentioned Serge Ibaka. I don't think that'll happen. I feel like that's less likely for whatever reason, but I would also be fine with him. And again, I know these are guys that are on the twilight side of their career, but you're not looking for someone who can contribute a ton. You're looking for someone who can give you 10 minutes or potentially, just help out given certain size matchups.
Absolutely. And for the people who are critical of Kevin Love's defense, valid. He's not a great defender, but as Bruce Morrow wrote in the chat, he did lock down Steph at the end of game 7. And he has championship experience. So he's a smart player, even if he's a little slow-footed. He's not worse. He's not worse than Anthony Lamb. And what he makes up for in defense with his offense is absolutely vital. He's also a phenomenal rebounder. It would be foolish if the Warriors passed on him if they had a chance to get him. I really hope that they do make this happen. Someone else wrote in the chat that the Heat could offer more money. Not true. No one's going to offer him more money in the buyout market. Now, if the Heat come out and say, we'll give you an extension for next year and beyond, that's a different story. But if it's just for this season, no one is paying more than anyone else. It's going to be just the vet min. So there's no truth to the Heat giving him more money in that regard. But if he wants to go there instead, then so be it. G-Dot, how mean of you saying Kylen got to get a better guess than me. Shame on you. You're going timeout, buddy. I'm going to put you on timeout. That's just not a nice thing to say to me. My feelings. I'm kidding. I don't care. But that's still disrespectful. You're in timeout. When we come back, I did some research in terms of differentials, in terms of what 5-man units for the Warriors thrive. Who's second beside the Warriors' lethal starting 5, which is tops in the NBA, and also literally wrote down every plus-minus differential for every player on the roster. We're 50 games in, all right? That's past the 2/3 mark. It is crazy there's only 24 games left in the regular season. Insane. The season is winding down. So the Warriors need to take action. They need to make some things happen. And when you're this deep into a season, the plus minus is revealing. And I'm going to share that next, along with some sound from Bob Myers, because he was also on 95.7 The Game. And he also said something interesting as well. But first, got to give some love to a new sponsor. When you got major car companies sponsoring your little show, you're heading toward the big time. And this week, it's Nissan. And we are going to, as long as Nissan is a sponsor, present each week Nissan's most electric player of the week, which is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. So the player of the week, Kylen and I, we talked about it. This was a brutal week to debut a electric player of the week because the Warriors have lost 3 of their last 4. But we went with a player who thrived in that one win, and that's JaMychal Green, who's since coming back from the leg infections, from the sickness, he's actually been playing great ball. And in that one win, he only played 16 minutes against the Wizards, but he scored 14 points. He actually had 5 assists, went 4 for 4 from deep. So he is our Nissan Electric Player of the Week. Any thoughts you want to add to JaMychal Green?
Yeah, I mean, when JaMychal Green is knocking down shots like that from beyond the arc, he's critical. You want to talk about a floor spacer, that spaces the floor immediately. And I agree. I think he's been playing really well since coming back. I mean, I think it took a little bit of time, but since coming back from that infection, and he was out for a long time, I think that he suddenly has looked really good. I mean, if he could somehow be like someone who can contribute in the playoffs and the postseason and add some size, like that wouldn't be terrible. I just am not sold yet because he did get a really slow start to the season. I think he's been a little bit inconsistent. But what we've seen from him lately, if he continues on that trend, he could be a huge boost for the Dubs off the bench. And he was great. He was great in that performance on Monday night. I also want to give an honorable mention shout out to Andrew Wiggins because he's a player we both talked about. I mean, no kidding. That was Andrew Wiggins' best night since coming back from injury and illness. Unfortunately, though, he wasn't able to play on Tuesday against the Clippers because of some type of personal issue or family reasons. He was out for that game. So it made it a little bit tough since he only played in the one game this week to give him the player of the week. But I feel like he deserves like an honorable mention shout out because Andrew Wiggins, when he's aggressive and attacking the basket the way he was against the Wizards, he really, really helps ramp up the Warriors offense. So honorable mention shout out to Wiggs.
Absolutely. And the player who we name the electric player of the week is named so because they're electric, they're brilliantly fierce, they're fiercely elegant, stunningly powerful, elegantly powerful, and that's exactly what the Nissan Ariya is. The 2023 Nissan Ariya packs pin you to your seat power and premium intelligence all in one electric vehicle. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the electric vehicle for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. You can follow Kylen Mills on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Kylen Mills. Super easy. And you can follow this show on Twitter at Locked On Dubs. We're starting next week. Any show I do solo, I'm going to tweet out from our show's Twitter account. If anyone's interested in joining me, instead of in the chat, actually jumping in for a couple minutes and having some discourse with me, just having fun. So follow the Twitter account, Locked On Dubs, for more information if you actually want to come on this show through the video section of it, like a phone call, as opposed to just being in the chat. So here's some research I did, and I'd love your feedback, Kylen, on this information here. I'm going to start things off with the most efficient lineup in the NBA. In the entire NBA is Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, and Kevon Looney. They played 331 minutes together, and they lead the entire NBA in net rating at plus 21.9. What that means is that for every 100 possessions, the Warriors with that five-man unit are outscoring the opposition by 21.9 points per game. To put it in context, second highest net rating for a five-player group in the NBA is Caldwell Pope, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, and Nikola Jokic of the Nuggets, who have played 416 minutes together, and they own a 16.6 net rating. So the Warriors starting five outscores the Nuggets starting five by over 5 points per game per 100 possessions. The Warriors starting five is awesome, okay? And that's where there's no concern. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard this before, that the Warriors starting five is fantastic. They're beating other teams. The problem is the bench, and we'll get into that in just a second. First off, and real quick, the third most efficient five-player unit is, weirdly enough, from the Knicks. Jalen Brunson, Quentin Grimes, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, and Mitchell Robinson have played 392 minutes played together, and they have a plus 8.1 net rating. So just to recap, the Warriors starting five, 21.9, plus 21.9 per 100 possessions. The Nuggets five has a plus 16.6, and then the third best is the Knicks five, and they have a plus 8.1. I hope I didn't lose you folks with those numbers, and that include, and Kylen, I hope I didn't lose you. What were your thoughts on that? Anything to add to that?
I mean, to me, just hearing that fact about the Warriors, the fact that these starting five are the best in the entire league, when it comes to that differential, that's an indictment on the bench. That's an absolute indictment on the bench. It's not a shock to me because the Warriors won the championship last season with the same starting five. What has changed? Well, it's everyone else coming off the bench, essentially after Jordan Poole. And so that's where the issue lies in this season, because if the Warriors have the most effective starting five in the NBA, they won a championship last season, and this season they're 500. I mean, I think immediately that points to, a lack of depth and issues with who's coming in off the bench. And then also someone not necessarily on the roster in that way is Mike Brown. I don't think it can be overlooked that Mike Brown moved on from the Warriors, their defensive coordinator last season, and moved on to the Sacramento Kings, where he's been hugely successful. So those two factors to me are a reason why the Warriors have gone from NBA champions with the same starting lineup as last season to 500 this season, while still having the most effective starting five in the NBA. Losing Mike Brown and then the changeover in the bench, I think a lot of players, role players last season were taken for granted, and that, it's shown this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Kylen, when we come back, I'm going to read to you which Warriors group of five is the second most efficient. And then I'm going to tell you how the group of five that plays the second most minutes, how they're doing. There's going to be a lot of revelation from these stats. Firstly, I'd give some love to Built Bar. Kylen, I need to just order you a box. I promised you this for months. I was waiting for them to send me some, and I was going to forward it to you. So I will not be cheap, because you have to try these things. I'm losing weight because of them, and I love it because despite the fact that they taste good, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. On average, they only have 130 calories per bar. They only have 4 grams of sugar per bar. Yet despite those low figures of bad things you put in your body, a good thing to put in your body, protein, Built Bars pack a whopping 17 grams of it. And you know a product is moving on its way up when it starts becoming available in stores and not just online. Walmart now sells 4-bar boxes of Built. You can get cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs at your nearest Walmart. And if you're close to Sam's Club, you can grab a 13-bar box with hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. And of course, you can go to Built.com. I'd recommend the sample package. Go buy some Built Bars today. It's perfect for that late night snack. If you're trying to lose weight, it's great to make you feel full. And again, if you just want protein and not a lot of bad things to put in your body, go check out Built Bars.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. One final segment. You can follow Kylen Mills on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Kylen Mills. You can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Twitter at DogSurf Roadshow. The second most efficient 5-player group on the Warriors. And I put in a minimum of 30 minutes played together because there were some lineups that played maybe like a minute together who might have had a larger number. So I went with 30 minutes played together as the bare minimum. And the most efficient of the group, interestingly enough, is a 5-man unit of Dante DiVincenzo, Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson, Jonathan Kuminga, and Draymond Green. When those 5 play together, they're plus 37.5. Now, granted, they've only played 30 minutes together, but that's revealing to me. Your thoughts on that?
That's fascinating. That's again just a shorter lineup. The smaller lineups, which I honestly have been kind of complaining about, that I think the Warriors need some size. So that's interesting. I mean, it's not a huge shock because I like Dante DiVincenzo, and I think Jonathan Kuminga has really been an X factor in the bench play this season. Like a lot of the positives, I believe, in the second unit have come as Jonathan Kuminga has gotten more time. And I think he's still continuing to be on the upward trend. I think that he's playing well. And I think Kuminga is going to end up being really, really critical to the second unit getting it together if they get it together. But that's a funny lineup. That's interesting. I do want to mention something, though, about a couple comments that were made in the chat about comparing last season to this season. And, the Warriors having the same starters, but not having the same success. A lot of people point to, injuries this season. It's not that different than last season. I mean, I just feel like people kind of forget. So I know Andrew Wiggins has missed more time this season. Last season, he played in almost every game, maybe missed 10. Draymond Green only played about half the games last year. He was in the 40s. So a little over half, because Draymond Green was injured for a lot of time. So yeah, I know you're saying, hey, Andrew Wiggins has missed extensive time this year, but last season, let me look. You know what? Draymond Green played in 46 games last season. Yeah. And he's already played in several more than that where we're at right now at the All-Star break. And then also same thing with Steph Curry. I don't know if he's on pace to play the exact amount, but he missed about 20 games last season as well. And if he returns after the All-Star break and plays the rest of the season, he would be playing a little bit more, I believe, or if not the same as he did last season. So I know people like to point to injuries, but like I feel like sometimes it's easy to forget there were some injury issues last season as well, specifically involving Draymond and Steph. So I don't think you can necessarily point to, a couple of starters being hurt. Like I think it's very clear that the bench play, the depth, and the pieces in the second unit changing are absolutely a factor.
And Klay Thompson missed the first 3 months of the season too, and they went 18-2 without him. And the most efficient lineup for the Warriors has Klay in it. In fact, the two most efficient ones I just named have Klay in both of them. He wasn't there at all for like over half the season last year. So I hear you. I'm with you.
Yeah, I just don't think it's fair to say like injuries this season are the reason. Like I don't believe it.
Yeah. So going on to this research I did, the 5-player group who is second on the team in minutes played together, following the starters, is Steph, Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, and Draymond Green. They're quote unquote modern day death lineup, right? It's also a small ball lineup. They were starting teams with this for a little while. They played 155 minutes together, and they're minus 2.0 in terms of differentials. So per 100 possessions, that 5-player unit is outscored by 2 points per 100 possessions. So it's not effective. It's like that small ball unit is not succeeding this year. Any opinions on that?
I think it's interesting. I think it's fascinating. I like the small ball lineup last season, but in certain situations, not as like a lineup that you turn to. And I've always thought that the Warriors need more depth in the front court. And I think that just further proves it, that I think it does depend a lot on the opponents that they're playing, but I do think in a lot of situations you need size. Like flat out, it's the NBA. You need size when you're running lineups out there where a 6'6" guy is the tallest guy, and 6'5" is the shortest player on the opposing team's lineup. Like you're going to just run into problems. So to me, I still think that depth in the front court and adding some size would be great for the Warriors in the buyout market.
Wholeheartedly agree with you. And then and then Bruce Morrow writes, "Let me be Cyrus. Ty, Jerome, and Lamb were not on the team last year." Well, that's true. It is true. That's all I've been saying. And then the last thing, I want to share my screen for this. I made a list of the plus minus, the net rating for all the individuals. Okay, now keep in mind we're now 58 games into the season, well past the 2/3 mark. And it's unfair, unfortunately, that Andre Iguodala is number one on the team in net rating because he's only played like 3 games. But he is a plus 18.8. Who knows if he's ever going to play again? It's just weird that he's on the team. I don't understand it at this point. Zal just
my neck, my back, my neck and my back. Oh.
Yeah, I think it's just I don't know. I use that roster spot, I think is what I'm trying to say here. Stephen Curry is second at plus 5.3. Andrew Wiggins is third, plus 5.2. Draymond Green is plus 4.8. Kevon Looney plus 3.6. Klay Thompson plus 2.7. Dante DiVincenzo is the last player on this list who through 58 games this year has a net rating in the positive at plus 0.7. Now we get to the negative, which is the complete other half of the roster. And this right here is why the Warriors are a 500 team at the 58-game mark, and really is the fundamental difference between last year and this year. Because last year you had Otto Porter Jr. on this list, you had Nemanja Bjelica on this list, you had Gary Payton II on this list, you had Juan Toscano Anderson, Damian Lee. Those are the 5 names gone. And who replaced them? Anthony Lamb, who's minus 1.8. Jordan Poole, who actually was on the team last year as well. And this is a weird one. He's minus 2.6. And I feel like he's really emerged as like this polarizing figure on the Warriors roster, because a lot of people are pointing the finger at him as the reason why the Warriors overall are struggling, that he's not carrying his weight. Kylen, I want to ask you about Poole in just a second. Let me just go through the rest of this list because I think it's worth giving him some time. Jonathan Kuminga is minus 4.2. Moses Moody is minus 5.2. Ty Jerome is also minus 5.2. JaMychal Green is minus 5.9. And then James Wiseman, who's no longer with the team, he was a minus 19.3. Patrick Baldwin Jr. We'll talk about him in a second as well because people are asking about him, and he was also injured in last night's game. I'll give you an update on that in just a moment. He's minus 22.4. And then last but not least, or maybe a little least, Ryan Rollins, another rookie who's also out for the year at minus 38.1. Those are your net ratings for the Golden State Warriors this year, 58 games in. I want to ask you about Jordan Poole. What are your thoughts on Poole being a negative in this? And is it an anomaly? Do you think there's some credence that maybe this reflects reality? Your thoughts on Jordan Poole struggling with his net rating this year?
Yeah. Honestly, I'm not really shocked based on the way that he's played. I think that Jordan Poole has been exposed a little bit. He leads the team in turnovers right now. I see that being a huge issue for him. I still think, as late as we are in the season, that we're seeing times where he's rushing possessions, not playing composed, and doing too much. I think that it comes in waves, and there's times where he looks great, and then there's other times that you're just like, what are you doing with the ball? And I also think his late game execution has been suspect. And we already know the defensive liability that he is, which is something that he's needed to work on his entire NBA career. Like, that's no big surprise or shock. But I just think on the offensive end, like, he needs to slow down, maintain composure, and let the game come to him a little bit more and stop trying to do so much. And I feel like we see so many times with these unnecessary turnovers, late game turnovers, and it's not all the time, but I think he's streaky. And there's times where he doesn't look great. I just think it's interesting, I would expect more from him just given the massive contract he signed in the offseason, $10+ million for 4 years. I think people expected him to elevate his play more. And we saw a huge jump last year in his play from just 2 seasons ago. And I think everyone was kind of expecting him to bring it up another notch. And I don't see it happening. I don't see it right now. And I don't think he's necessarily worse, but I just feel like taking care of the basketball and some of the offensive possessions are cringe when you watch Jordan Poole, in addition to just already having issues on the defensive side. Now, there are absolutely times, and I still think he can score. Like, I think he can score in different ways. That's great. But at the same time, you've got to be able to take care of the ball a little bit. I mean, I know Steph Curry usually, just because he handles the ball so much and he play makes so much and he does so much, like, yes, he's also like a higher turnover player, but like Jordan Poole is well surpassed him. Jordan Poole is averaging, I think, nearly 3.5 turnovers a game, which is far above anyone else on the team. I got to look that up because I looked it up recently. But, again, I just think late game execution and him rushing possessions has been a huge issue.
I have the stats right in front of me. Jordan Poole does lead the team in turnovers at 3.3 per game. Okay. Right behind him is Stephen Curry at 3.2, but obviously Steph does so much more than Jordan Poole. And it's worth noting, so Jordan Poole, in terms of a year-by-year comparison to last year he averaged 30 minutes per game. This year he's at 30.7. So it's almost identical. He's averaging just a smidge more. His scoring has gone up from 18.5 points per game. Now he's averaging 20.9. That's awesome. His assists have gone up from 4 assists per game to 4.5 assists per game. That's awesome. What's not awesome, and this is a very glaring part of his game, that, as we mentioned, the turnovers. Last year he averaged 2.5, so it's gone up to 3.3, but he's only averaging on average 45 seconds more per game. So that is not good, that he's averaging almost a whole turnover more per game despite playing practically the same amount of minutes. And then his shooting percentages are down. His overall field goal percentage is almost the same as last year. Last year he shot 44.8%. This year he's averaging 44% even, but the three-point shooting has gone down considerably. Last year he was shooting 36.4% from beyond the arc. This year it's down to 33.5. And in terms of average amount of threes attempted, last year he averaged 7.6 attempts per game. This year that's slightly up to 8. So his shooting's gone down. He's turning the ball over more. He's also scoring a little more. That's what's going on with him. So I don't know. I don't know if you can afford to cut back his minutes unless you give him to Dante DiVincenzo, who I love. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know, but that's what's going on with Jordan Poole. And then real quick, Patrick Baldwin Jr. last night got hit in the leg. A player on the other team made this basket, and he was just flailing his body around, and his whole body just fell into Patrick Baldwin Jr.'s knee, and I don't know if it was a hyperextension, but he is apparently fine, just to give people an update on that, because the Warriors called him up. He's back with the team from Santa Cruz, so apparently he's okay, thank goodness. What do you think about Patrick Baldwin Jr.? Like, a lot of people are clamoring for him to play more. I agree. I mean, he's 6'10", yet he has that beautiful three-point shooting stroke. What are your thoughts on PBJ? Do you like how Kerr's handling him?
I definitely would like to see more of PBJ, especially given the current circumstances with the Warriors. They've had some opportunities to go deeper in the roster with injuries, and that's where I would like to see give him some more run, give him some more NBA time. So I wouldn't be opposed, and he's someone, like you said, who brings size, could potentially be, that stretch big player, could also help stretch the floor if he can knock down shots. But I think for sure he's a player that you would like the coaching staff to get a little bit more involved and to give him some more run.
I agree. I really hope he plays more. So there you go. That's what's going on with the Warriors at the All-Star break. I was going to play some sound from Bob Myers, but there's nothing really new there. So we're up against the clock. Anything else you feel like we should mention that I forgot, Kylen? Did we cover everything? Any final thoughts before we take off for the weekend and the All-Star break? You want to think about the All-Star game, right?
Yeah, my quick final thought about the NBA All-Star game is, in case people didn't see the tweets that are out there, that the NBA is thinking about switching around the order that they choose the NBA All-Star teams so that people don't have hurt feelings, or I guess that the player who's the last pick doesn't feel bad. They want to avoid a last pick situation, because as it stands right now, typically the two team captains, who are the leading vote getters or whatever, they each pick their team, they pick the starters, and then they pick the reserves. And obviously the last picked reserved is the last person picked in the NBA All-Star game. So they're trying to avoid that. So they want the reserves to be picked first and then the All-Star starters second, in order to avoid, I don't know, someone being last picked. Like I said, I guess hurting feelings. And I just think that's crazy. I think it's hilarious. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. I understand being sensitive to people's feelings, but that's a little much. That's ridiculous. Are you going to watch the game, Kylen? I used to always love watching the game for the simple reason that it was one of the easiest bets to win, because you just bet the over and they nail that thing 19 out of 20 times. But now they have this Elon ending, however you pronounce that, where it's not there. You can't bet on the over anymore, is what I'm trying to say. And that was like the only reason why I'd watch. No Steph and Curry, no Warriors. Are you going to watch it all? Any excitement? Because I'm not.
I don't know. I probably am going to watch, but without Steph, I mean, watching Steph last season was like the highlight of the NBA All-Star game. So I think a lot of people who mentioned that made a great point. So cupcake NBA it is. That's all I got.
And I think, and I do think PS is right that James Harden's feelings got hurt, because I think he was the last pick last year, I believe. So that does make some sense if he was the one that was complaining about it. The total, Gilbert Arbala writes, the over-under is 320 on MGM. But again, if they're doing that Elon ending, I don't know if that's a surefire bet anymore. So I don't know. Anyways. All right. I guess that's it, folks. Thank you. Kylen and I will be back at this either Sunday or Monday. Follow the Twitter account @LockedOnDubs to find that information. And if you want to just jump on this show for one of the nights, for example, when I'm doing a post-game show, Kylen's not available, no one else is available, you can join the party. Just follow Locked On Dubs. We'll tweet out how you can be a part of the show. And Damon Bruce is coming on Tuesday. I'm super excited about that, because he's the one that's asking Kerr all these questions. And I got to find out what's going through his brain whenever he asks Kerr something and Kerr just gives him like a non-answer. Because I'm guessing Damon is furious on the other side of the mic. Yeah. Okay. Are we good? We done? We out? Have a great weekend, Kylen. Congrats on the earthquakes news, by the way. That is awesome. You can watch Kylen Mills on Apple TV. That is huge. That is freaking huge. Congrats on that. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Well deserved. All right, folks, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye. Peace.